Does your life seem empty? Does it lack a deep sense of meaning, fulfillment, and purpose? If so, there's a good chance that you are living in a cave. Not a literal cave, but a cave in an allegorical sense. You find yourself in this cave because you have unwittingly absorbed a severely impoverished concept of reality from your culture, a severely impoverished concept of what it means to exist or to be. Outside of this cave, a richly fulfilling and fascinating journey of transformation awaits you. What is reality? What does it mean to exist or to be? The ancient Greek philosopher Plato explored this question about 2,400 years ago when he wrote The Allegory of the Cave, Book 7 of the Republic. This allegory opens with a description of a group of prisoners who have spent their entire lives chained to the wall of a dark cave. Behind the prisoners, and out of their view, is a fire which casts shadows from objects near the fire onto the wall in front of them. The shadows on the cave wall are the prisoners' entire reality, and their minds cannot even conceive of the objects which cast the shadows, let alone the sunlit world outside of the cave. They do not wish to escape their cave because they do not even realize that they are prisoners, and that their experience of reality consists of merely shadows of higher reality. But one day, a prisoner escapes from his chains and leaves the cave, where he discovers a far deeper reality in the sunlit world outside of the cave. When he returns to the cave to tell the prisoners to remain chained of his amazing experiences, they mock him and tell him that he's crazy. Plato's allegory of the cave examines the discrepancy between what we perceive reality to be, the shadows, and the higher reality which is the truth, outside of the cave. Escape from your cave begins by considering that the material world, at least as you perceive it, is a shadow illusion of a higher reality. In order to be truly open-minded, one must be willing to consider that one's own perception of reality is limited by cultural and historical factors. Great danger exists in confusing one's own perception of reality with reality itself. Craig Keener recounts the story of the king of Siam in his book Miracles. Because this king lived in a tropical region before the advent of mass communication and rapid transportation hundreds of years ago, his perception of the world did not allow for the possibility of frozen rivers. Hearing from Dutch visitors about riding horses on top of rivers that were so cold they became hard like stone, this man knew that the men were liars. Zhuangzi, an ancient Chinese philosopher from the 4th century BC, superbly expressed the need to be wary of the limitations of one's own perception of reality when he wrote, "A frog in a well cannot discuss the ocean because he is limited by the size of his well. A summer insect cannot discuss ice because it knows only its own season. A narrow-minded scholar cannot discuss the Tao, translated as the way or the path, because he is constrained by his own teachings. Now you have come out of your banks and seen the great ocean. You now know your own inferiority, so it is now possible to discuss great principles with you." Is it possible to discuss great principles with you? Your ability to escape from the doldrums of an unfulfilling and purposeless life and into a rich and fulfilling life outside your allegorical cave will to a large extent be dictated by your willingness to consider that you are like a summer insect who cannot conceive of ice, or a frog in a well who cannot conceive of the ocean. The metaphorical well in which you live is the concept of reality which you have inherited from your culture. At the core of your being, what are you? Are you just a thing? A complex pile of atoms and molecules? The media and much of academia would have you believe that this is in fact the case, and if they are right, the implications could not be more depressing. Friedrich Nietzsche, arguably the most influential atheist philosopher of all time, put it best when he wrote, "Let us beware of saying that death is the opposite of life. The living being is only a species of the dead." A complex pile of atoms and molecules cannot have an ultimate purpose for its existence because material things such as atoms and molecules do not have purposes. I submit that if you are feeling purposeless and empty, this falsehood you have unwittingly absorbed from your culture is largely to blame. The backwards or upside down concept of reality, which says that nothing exists except for bundles of matter doomed to ultimate oblivion, known in philosophy as materialism, leads to empty and ultimately meaningless lives. In his late middle age, after attaining great wealth, fame, and social status, Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy realized that his life was devoid of meaning or purpose. In his book titled A Confession, Tolstoy specifically cites the inability of the materialist worldview, which again says that we are nothing but bundles of purposeless matter, to provide meaning or purpose. If we are ultimately nothing but bundles of meaningless matter, he asks, how can one's life have any meaning? Tolstoy writes, inquiring for one region of human knowledge, I received an innumerable quantity of exact replies concerning matters about which I had not asked, about the chemical constituents of the stars, about the origin of species and of man. But in this sphere of knowledge, the only answer to my question, what is the meaning of my life, was, you are what you call your quote-unquote life. You are a transitory, casual cohesion of particles. The mutual interactions and changes of these particles produce in you what you call your life. That cohesion will last some time. Afterwards, the interactions of these particles will cease, and what you call your life will cease, and so will all of your questions. You are an accidentally united little lump of something. This is a depressing outlook on life, to say the least. However, if you are a spiritual being, rather than just a material object, who is part of a web of a higher spiritual reality, then you exist for a higher purpose endowed by your Creator, and your life can have a rich and meaningful sense of purpose. As C.S. Lewis wrote, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition, when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. Throughout history, we have had to periodically revise our understanding of the world in which we live, and sometimes in a radical way. Prior to the ancient Greeks, for example, it was commonly perceived that the earth is flat. Imagine for a moment how difficult it must have been for certain ancient people to wrap their heads around the notion that the earth is round. If this is so, they must have asked themselves, why don't objects just fall off? It will come as a surprise to many viewers that our current day culture requires a far more radical revision of its perception of reality. An Inc.com article notes that billionaire Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX fame believes that reality, as we perceive it, is in fact an illusion. In his view, we are living in the Matrix, or a computer simulation created by an advanced future civilization. I agree with Musk that the material world is ultimately an illusion, at least in the manner in which we perceive it, and that we are living in a matrix. However, I disagree with him with regards to the nature of this matrix. Further, millions of modern people are confined to an impoverished, Plato-esque shadow reality in an allegorical cave, not due to the actions of some future advanced civilization, but rather due to the impoverished concept of reality, which is the product of our own philosophically backward civilization. Rather than being an illusion or a computer simulation created by an advanced future civilization, the matrix we live in is in reality the mental/spiritual matrix of the mind of God. To this end, Max Planck, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist who made the crucial scientific contribution of founding quantum physics, writes, as a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Similarly, the Nobel Prize-winning Harvard University biologist George Wald comments in his address to the Quantum Biology Symposium titled Life and Mind in the Universe. It has occurred to me lately, I must confess, with some shock at first to my scientific sensibilities, that both questions, the origin of mind and the origin of life from non-living matter, might be brought into some degree of congruence. This is with the assumption that mind, rather than emerging as a late outgrowth in the evolution of life, has existed always as the matrix. The source and condition of physical reality, the stuff of which physical reality is composed, is mind stuff. It is mind that is composed of physical universe that breathes life and so eventually evolves creatures that know and create. Science, art, and technology making animals. Johns Hopkins University physicist Richard Conn Henry reflects Wald when he concludes his article titled The Mental Universe. The universe is immaterial, mental, and spiritual. Live and enjoy. But true enjoyment will remain forever unattainable to those who are confined by the dark cave of the materialist worldview. Please recognize that you have received glimpses of this higher reality before. Perhaps it was in the beauty of a sunset, or in a mountain meadow covered with flowers, or in the scent of a flower. Or perhaps you received glimpses of this higher reality listening to beautiful music, or in the richness of a loving human relationship, such as a romantic relationship or a parent-child relationship. In order to be coherent, a worldview or a concept of what it means to exist or to be must reasonably explain the various aspects of reality which we experience. Aspects of reality which a given worldview fails to account for must be considered as evidence against that worldview. A key problem for materialism, as Tolstoy alluded to earlier, is that material things, or accidentally united little lumps of something, cannot have any ultimate purpose. Therefore, if materialism is true, a human being is really nothing but a cohesion of particles, and our lives can have no ultimate meaning. But one must ask, if there is no such thing as meaning or purpose, why do we hunger and thirst for it? Why would we so desperately search for something which doesn't even exist? The fundamental inability of materialism to answer this question must be considered a fatal explanatory failure. To this end, C.S. Lewis writes, "If the whole universe has no meaning, we should never have found out that it has no meaning, just as, if there were no light in the universe, and therefore no creatures with eyes, we should never know it was dark. Dark would be without meaning." So what is behind the widespread tendency within our culture to act like ignorant children who prefer to play with mud pies in a slum or remain chained in a dark cave, as per Plato? One cannot experience lasting satisfaction and fulfillment without a correct understanding of one's true nature, without a correct understanding of what it means to exist or to be. Satisfaction and fulfillment will remain forever unattainable by those who fail to realize that their impoverished concept of reality traps them in a dark cave. Escaping from your cave will consist of realizing that you are an interconnected spiritual being with a higher purpose ordained by an infinite mind or spirit, God, or the mind which is the matrix of all matter, in the words of Max Planck, the founder of quantum physics. This YouTube channel will assist you escape one step at a time by removing the cultural myths which keep you trapped, much like peeling away the layers of an onion. Despite what your culture and much of academia has told you, the theistic worldview, which says that everything begins not with matter, but with a consciousness, is by far the most rationally sound stance, and makes the most sense of human experience and the insights of modern science, rather than a feel-good or make-believe solution to the bleakness of the materialist worldview. Freeing yourself from your dark cave will be the most fulfilling and fascinating journey a person could ever undertake. My name is Scott Youngren. Let me be your guide.